So this morning, Dave from Riot basically just addressed, are we getting bans in Riftbound? I want to talk about it for a few minutes, talk about my perspective, and just get into the state of Set 2 going into Set 3, which we're only about a week or so away from. Before I get into it, do the usual YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, and yeah, let's get into it. So, Dave Guskin, for those of you that are unaware, living under a rock, Dave is basically not only the game director, but like one of the faces of Riftbound. Has put out a set of tweets this morning, and I just want to read through them and then talk exactly about what it means. So, talking about discussing card bans in the near future, based on overly dominant play patterns, but important to note, none to announce today or an expected date for bans. It's not even reading between the lines to say this means there are no bans coming right now. There's a rules update coming on the 30th of March for new mechanics being released in Unleashed, aka Set 3, which we're expecting that anyway. Good to know there's also some clarities coming, some clarifications around penalties, judge rewinds, edge cases, and more. Some people are speculating that they might also change some of the rulings on combat, and whether winning combat means like pushing a unit away, you still win combat. They've actually not said anything about that, so we'll see. The tweets go on to say they're watching the meta evolve, and specifically looking at Bologna, Vegas, some of the China regionals, which I think is really important to note. Vegas is the only one that Draven, and if we're talking about Draven specifically rather than a wider issue, Vegas is the only one that Draven dominated the top four. Like Bologna, we had no Dravens in the top four. Draven did incredibly well on the floor day one. I think it had like a 38% conversion rate there or thereabouts. I didn't actually take the stats down before I started recording this video, so apologies if some of the stats are slightly off. So very, very strong, but didn't actually dominate and freeze out the other decks like we saw in Vegas. So I think that probably is going to give a little bit of pause for thought. As said, they were promising to tell us if they were considering bans. They only want to use them as a last resort, which I totally agree with as well at this point in the game, and to take a careful approach. So as the meta continues to develop, reviewing the data, no final calls have been made, and they're going to wait until after the Shenzhen Major Open in late March before making any changes. And this is the really important thing, that this one is now reading between the lines a little bit. As promised, we've committed to not making large changes so close to competitive events to try and ensure players have a chance to play test and adapt. That, to me, implies no bans before Lille. That doesn't mean that we won't get them, but that's the implication. If there's no date for bans, and there is communication on the 30th of March, and they want to give more time, Lille is only just over 2 weeks after that. So I think this is probably avoiding all of that, heading further towards Set 4. I guess, well, Set 3 will come after Lille, but we'll see exactly what happens. We've got preview season coming up in a couple of days. So really, some people have kind of taken this news as, oh, bans are coming. I actually take it completely the opposite. Knowing how stuff like this goes, this probably means bans aren't coming. And the reason I say that is because we're so early on in the game that when you look at what cards are problematic right now, I think most people say Cold Shot is the most problematic one, and I can get on board with the argument for banning it. Some people have called for Ezreal to be banned. Some people have called for Draven Legend to be banned. I think that's a rules tweak rather than like a full banning. I don't think we'll ever get a Legend ban, because if that happens, something has gone drastically wrong in like design and testing, because a Legend alone should not prop up everything that is happening. It should be the theme of an architect rather than an effect that is dominant. Draven is a good effect, it's an efficient effect, but is it enough to ban the entire Legend? I don't know. I don't necessarily think so. And then some calls for Fight or Flight to be banned. We'll go through one by one on these. So Cold Shot, I think, as I said, most likely to be banned, and the reason that I don't mind it so much if it were to be banned, which I don't think it will, but if it were to be banned, for me, one of the reasons why you can kind of safely ban it, and then if you need to unban it later, is because it's a relatively inexpensive card, in the sense of the rarity is not so much that people have spent money to invest time into finding the cards. That is something that is always going to be a consideration for this. It is a very strong card. I think there are ways to play around it, and this is something that I actually want to talk about. Is Riftbound does not have the tools to deal with particular archetypes yet, because we only have like 500 cards in the set. You look at a game like Magic, there are specific hate pieces built in to punish things. So for instance, Magic in Standard last year and the year before was all about drawing extra cards per turn. There was a hate piece printed in the Duskmourn set that was called Razorkin Needlehead that did 1 damage to your opponent every time they drew a card. So it was this piece that punished you for doing things. The card that comes to mind for something like this to take on the Miracle package would be an effect like Damping Sphere. The secondary ability on that card reads, paraphrasing it, that each spell costs 1 more for each spell you've cast this turn, meaning if you were to bring that into Riftbound, you'd say, okay, well, your first Cold Shot or your first spell costs the base energy and power on the card. You could easily then make it 1 power, 1 energy. So from there, if you cast like Stack Deck, that's 1. Cast another Stack Deck off it, well, now you might have to pay 2 + 1 power. And then it would really kind of punish that repeating effect. And you could even print that onto a battlefield if you wanted. Like you could print it as like when you control this battlefield, opponent spells cost 1 + 1 more for each effect. That could very well be in the next set. It could be in the set after. But my point is, if you ban Cold Shot and then print an effect like that, you can unban Cold Shot, and no one's really going to be too unhappy about it. Something like an Ezreal getting banned, people have been hunting down copies of the card. It's been in every purple deck, basically. So I would be really hesitant to rock that boat right now. People did invest in getting their decks together quite quickly for Bologna and Vegas, and if Ezreal were to catch a ban right now, I think it would put more people off. For instance, another Magic crossover. A lot of my Magic history is what's gonna come through here. Magic last year had 7 bans in the summer and then another 3 bans in November, and it destroyed all 4 of the decks that I played, to the point where I had no decks that were playable anymore by the end of the year. So I took a step away from Magic because it just became too difficult to rebuild all of my decks. There was a lot of core parts that got banned out of that. Even though they were like common cards, they were cards that enabled the rest of the deck in order to be very efficient, and then you have cards that don't work on their own. Fight or Flight, I kind of feel like there's something to me as like as a non-pro player that follows the pro scene. If Fight or Flight were as bad as needing a ban, you would see everybody jam Vilemores in every single deck for game 1 at a tournament, because if you know Fight or Flight is the problem, then there's a hate piece already in the game for it. You also have Minotaur Reckoner, but which is in red only. I'm not saying any of these things are good, but my point is, if these cards on their own were strong enough to warrant a ban, rather than designing your way out of it, or you know, being frustrated that they're efficient but waiting, then I'm kind of in that spot where I'm like, it's not strong enough on its own to ban, so let's not ban it, let's give it a little bit of time. I know people don't love that perspective, because especially pro players are grinding thousands of games in the lead up to tournament, and I do very much empathize with that. I will, however, compare that to League of Legends with scrim results, where my over a decade of working with teams in League of Legends, I can't tell you the number of times where I've heard that something is extremely strong in scrims, and then it comes on to a tournament stage and doesn't compete, doesn't put up the numbers that people are expecting. But because players are drilling it every single day, they're used to dealing with it every single day, they're frustrated at having to deal with something that they perceive to be very, very strong. And only every so once in a while do you end up in this situation where it's like so strong at tournaments that it's unbeatable. If I remember, there was like a Hecarim build in League for a while that was just like stomping scrims because you just snowballed way too hard out of the early game, and then people tried it once or twice in pro play and it just kind of did nothing and fell over, because if you didn't play If you played carefully, like you're playing in a real game, you could actually think your way around it, which a little bit inverse of card games, because card games you have time in a tournament setting. Anyway, my point being, when you're scrimming with something, when you're practicing with something, the environment is slightly different, but you have to take a different perspective on what is competitively, oppressive. And I would say that we're almost there for Draven. We're close. I don't want to neglect the fact that Vegas did happen and the results from it are something to consider, but I don't necessarily think that we're at the point that, for instance, and this is the last little bit that I want to focus on, we're not at a Nadu point, which for Magic players, you know exactly what I'm talking about. For players who don't know Magic, there was a card printed in 2024 called Nadu. I think it was like Winged Wisdom. I can't remember the full name. Nobody ever uses the full name. But Nadu was a card that essentially was changed right before it got printed and broke the Modern format. A little bit of backstory, I'll make this really quick because we're not here for Magic. Modern as a format is a format with extremely high-powered cards from the history of Magic. Magic breaks itself into different timed formats. You have Standard, which is the 3 most recent years. You have Pioneer, which is about back to 2015, I think it is, or maybe 2012. And Modern, which goes further, and then you got more and more formats that go further and further back. And the further back in time you go, the more cards are just quite frankly broken. And Nadu was a new card printed into a format supposedly for good old cards. And they only printed Modern Horizons like once every 2, maybe 3 years. And that's the important thing to know why I think Nadu is different to... and like that level of ban is different to what we see in Riftbound right now. Riftbound, we know we have multiple sets this year that will shake the entire format. The reason that Nadu as a deck was so strong is it allowed for a loop to basically play itself out. It warped the games that it was in because you basically had 10-minute turns of looping things from the top of the deck. It dodged a lot of the hate pieces, made these really unruly boards that people had to keep track of, delayed tournaments completely, and was extremely strong because once the loop started, you basically won the game anyway. All within a format that had no answers coming for years. Basically, every time a Magic set comes out, Modern players look at the set and go, garbage, nothing for us. you have Pioneer players that go, okay, there's 1 card in there, or 2 cards for us, we'll take that. Standard players will obviously be happy, because most sets have things that shake Standard from the nature of cycling. But Modern had nothing coming. There was nothing in the pipeline to deal with Nadu, so really the only answer to it was to ban it. People had already tried to figure their way out of it, the hate pieces weren't hitting it, so you just had to move that aside. Whereas we know... come Monday, it's preview season. Like, they could easily print a card. They could easily have designed a card, and I'm guessing here, obviously, but could easily design a card that we see on Monday that breaks purple. I would love to see a card, for instance, that removes, banishes the entire trash. Like, we have it in Magic. There's a card called Rest in Peace. Anytime a card would go to the graveyard, it gets exiled. The terms for Riftbound would be anytime a card would go to the trash, it gets banished. That would cut Rasa off immediately and shut out some of the top end of the miracle packages. If you had a spell that or a battlefield or a unit or a gear that said your opponent can only play 1 spell per turn, or play 1 card per turn, play only 1 thing per turn. Again, another thing that would immediately shut down the miracle decks, or at least make it so that you have a matchup that is horrific to play when you're sitting down at a closed deckless tournament and you don't know what you're playing. Best of 1, I think, is a little bit different because you'll have the new sideboard rules in effect, but a best of 3 tournament, if you don't know that you're going to dodge that, that's like a horrific match that you don't want to sit down and play against somebody who's got main board tech pieces against the best deck in the room. So anyway, all of that to say, probably no bans coming soon. I'm on board with that, but I do empathize with the people who want bans. The other last tiny part of this that you always have to consider is at the local level and multiplayer level and all of that kind of thing, differentiating a ban now for players that don't necessarily feel that under pressure by a deck sets a really bad precedent, in the sense of, like, if half of my cards get banned, or if the deck that I'm playing gets banned, and I'm not that invested in the game, I'm just going to walk away. I won't, because I'm very invested in the game. But a player that perhaps has, pulled an Ezreal out of their pre-Rift pack, that is really happy about playing it, and they built an Ezreal deck around it, and maybe it's a multiplayer deck, maybe they just want to jam games at their Nexus Night on their skirmish. If that gets banned, they're probably going to go, well, that sucks, I'm not going to go spend more money. So, something to consider. I know pro players and the pro level, you never really want to consider that, but we are so early on in the game right now that banning stuff and unbanning it quickly after, if it's rare cards, I would be extremely hesitant to want to see in the game, especially knowing that there's runway to design their way out of this. So hopefully the designers have kind of seen all of this coming. They're TCG players at heart, have been for a very long time. I think most people who have played TCGs for a while saw Cold Shot and went, that one might be a little bit overtuned. So I'm expecting some of the other color pairings and domains to kind of level up over the next set. Anyway, that was a lot of rambling. I just wanted to get something out, talk a little bit about bans, why I don't necessarily think that they're necessary. We are 1 month away from Lille. We got preview season in the middle. You know what? I'm going to make a suggestion. If you are burned out by playing constructed games against purple decks, play Draft. I'm going to go play a bunch of Draft. I cannot wait to draft Spirit Forge. I have not been able to yet. There has not been enough stock in my local game store in order to do it, but there are other ways to enjoy Riftbound. There are other ways to enjoy things, and just jam side events or Legend at Lille. I know those of you that are diehard competitive players will want to just jam games of Draven and do it, and that's fine, and you should, and I support your ability to do that. But those of you that are getting frustrated at Draven, but you barely ever play Draven or against Draven, there's plenty more to do. Let's play some Draft and enjoy ourselves. Cool. I'll post another vlog sometime soon. I didn't really anticipate talking for quite this long, but such is life, and I apparently enjoy hearing myself talk. So like, subscribe, leave me your comments below on what you think should or shouldn't be banned, whether you think they're necessary, and I'll catch you in another video.